So today we're going to talk about the CV and the resume, what they are and how to think about it, because they're two different documents. We're going to talk a little bit about transferable and legible skills, meaning how to translate what you do into the language that's going to be useful. We'll talk a little bit about the narrative arc, which is some work that you should be doing to think about I'm this, not that kind of thing, to think about and take those threads. How many people here went from like high school and then you went to, got your bachelor's and then graduate school and everything was just perfectly planned out and no detours? How many people here took detours during this path, right? Or have interests that seem a little bit different than maybe what you're doing, right? Well, what I'm going to talk about in the narrative arc is figuring out what those themes and threads are, because they matter. They tell us a lot about who you are, and there's usually a reason, and you can often use them to really put together a nice package of who you are. We're going to talk a little bit about how to get started and how to get experiences. Okay. And any questions? You can always stop me and, okay. Writing a CV. How many people here have a CV? Okay. So CV is a Latin for the course of life, course of one's life, right? It's a very specific document, and it's primarily used to present yourself as a scholar. And we see these kinds of requests for a CV in grant applications. If you want to go on to higher education, you want to teach, you would need a CV. Oftentimes, like the GSG, if they have some money, do they ask for a CV? Okay, then that didn't work. But others like the GLRC or other kinds of opportunities, they're asking for a CV. So it's primarily focused around the academy, but you'll also find other places like if you wanted to be the library director, they might ask you for a CV. And it's organized around your education, your experiences. And when I talk about experiences, I'm talking about teaching and research, right? And your accomplishments. And accomplishments would be what? Publications, awards, grants, those kinds of things, okay? It's a very predictable format, and they're looking for a very predictable format. That said, a CV in my discipline in anthropology is going to be a little different than a CV in civil engineering. You need to know what that format is, okay? But somebody who's reading a CV is looking for specific information, and it needs to be predictable. So going back here to this, the drive on here, Karen Kelsky's advice for CVs gives you a really nice rundown of how to do it, how to format it, and what the headings are. I recommend that highly, and that's available for you later. And if you're going to apply for anything related to grants or fellowships or an academic position, you should be submitting a CV. Now, it seems fair enough. You throw some headings on there, teaching, research, right? I got a couple grants, throw them in there. The people that are on the other side reading those CVs, particularly if you're applying for an academic job, it's like mental jujitsu, okay? They are figuring out how old you are, if there's any gaps in your research, if you're overstating things, okay? These are documents that I can scan. You can give me, scan something in 5 of them in 5 minutes, and I can come up with a lot of stuff from there, because we're reading between the lines. And if you give me a CV that isn't in the acceptable format, I can tell you by and large, your grant committees, your academics are going to get grumpy about it. So those you need to follow a specific format. Okay. So follow a standard format. I recommend the Karen Kelsky. Tailor it to each position's expectations. And what I mean by that is, let's say you're applying for an academic job in humanities, right? And one of them's for, let's say, gender and 18th century literature, and the other one's on environmental sciences and gender, right? Your CV, if there's any way to maybe prioritize some work that you've done, publications on gender or things like that, or you want to reorganize your CV in a way that speaks to that. And then finally, you, you really have to be accurate, okay? Um, the dates need to be accurate. You don't, if you had a fellowship that was for, 2 months and you're writing a year, that's kind of not okay. So you need to make sure your stuff is accurate, okay? Any questions? All right. What is a resume? How many people have a resume? How long is it? 1 page. Two, 1 page. Woo, good. Any 2 pages? Oh, okay, good. Any 3? 4? Okay. Well, let's talk about what a resume is and then how you need to go do a little sleuthing to make sure you're sending out the right ones. So what is a resume? It's a marketing document, right? You're marketing yourself to get a job. What do you want when you send out a resume? You want at least a phone call, right? So it's really important. And it should be concise and industry specific with your summary of your education, your skills, and your experiences. All right. Seems straightforward, but there's many ways that you can present this information. It needs to be an honest reflection of your accomplishments. Okay. Can't say that you have a degree from somewhere that you don't. And it's a tool, right? It evolves as you gain professional experience. Maybe some things get dropped out, right? Maybe you have other things that are coming up. And it's often the first impression that your employer has of you. They also know another thing that they do too, though, is a lot of times those resumes are just read with algorithms, right? So they're looking for specific information. We'll get to that in a moment. Okay. Some standards. Again, it depends. So I was looking at higher ed jobs the other day, and I always thought it was only 2 pages for a resume. So if they asked for a resume, but when I looked at the person that received the job as I think the provost, he had he had like a 4-page resume and had bulleted points. So it said, dean of the graduate school, and had bullet points. Professor of such and such, bullet points, and talked specifically of what that person did. So you need to do some research. You need to talk to people and ask, what is the standard in the industry that I'm presenting this in? Okay. Typically, the format should be clearly organized and easy to scan. Why do I say that? Why does it need to be easy to scan? Yeah, a lot of times they're not even reading it. They're just throwing it through some scanner, and what are they picking up on? Keywords. So this is a real important document to be working with when you're looking at the ad. Make sure the ad and your document includes similar language, right? Those kinds of things matter. There's different kinds of ways to organize it. You can use bold, underlining, and italics for emphasis, but use sparingly. Okay, you don't want to overdo it. Margins. What do people think about margins? Make them very tiny so you can pack a whole bunch in. No. Yeah, no. Yeah, no. They're on to you. So I'm a 1/2 inch. What do people think about 1/2 inch margin? Yeah, you need some white space because also, people are different. I know for me, if I don't see any white space, my brain gets tired and I stop reading. So you need a little white space. So how do you get the feedback on your resumes? You share them with other people, you ask your advisors, and really ask them for specific feedback, not does this look good? But do you think I could get an interview? Do you think I could get a job? And if they hand it back to you and say, this looks great, then go ask someone else, okay? Because you really do need the feedback. and the feedback needs to be tough. So differences between the CVs and the resumes. The CVs, again, the purpose is academic experiences. The resume is experiences related for a job. These are just general. Audience might be on a CV, a fellowship committee, a hiring committee, academics. On the other side for resume, it's industry or employer. You know, there's length. Some of these CVs, as you get on, can be 20 pages long. Yeah, my CV is like 16 pages, right? And I'm often going through there and removing things so that, you know, they can't, like I said, they don't know how old I am. So I remove a few things like, oh, that paper, we don't need that. These kinds of things. So it's a much longer document. Have I ever sent out a CV where they asked for a resume? Yes, I did. Did I get a call? No. So they knew right away that I wasn't up to snuff for that. Okay. Experience on the CV not included. You don't put a statement on there. Sometimes the resumes have these statements at the top. Does your resume have a statement? Yours has a statement? Yes. Yes. That's a very good question. Yeah. So you need to ask, go sleuth, ask other people around it. So maybe you're not going to ask that employer or that person, but you might ask around it, someone from the institution, someone that's in the know. Because that's really when we need feedback. So another theme that might come out of the CVs and resumes, it seems like this is something that you're doing in your office all by yourself, right? This whole career trajectory portfolio thing that I'm asking you to put together is really something that you need to be thinking of all the time while you're here and discussing with other people, so that you can put together this package that you're going to need to be, you know, successful in the market. So I probably didn't answer your question, but okay. Again, distinctions. CV is, and the resume is partial and focused. And so how are you supposed to figure this out? Right? What are they asking for? Maybe I want to send a hybrid. There should be information on the website, and if there's not, maybe call or email the human resource person and ask them, what typically is the standard? Are you expecting a 2-page resume? Can I send a hybrid? You know, those kinds of things. Okay. Any questions? All right. All right. Now, one of the things that you need to do on a CV, and particularly a resume, is think about your skill set, right? So as an anthropologist, I think I mentioned in the last time, my skill set, I thought, was pretty limited to anthropology and being a professor. And when I came out the other side, like I discussed last time, there were no jobs. And I came out the other side and I was trained for one job only, an anthropology professor. And fortunately, you know, some things worked out. But had I known differently, I would have prepared 2 career trajectories. And that was the subject of the last one. But I wasn't just an anthropologist. I actually had a lot of skills. Uh-huh. And those skills, now that I've had time to think about them, I'm translating those and making them legible. So the fact that I'm able to, in a day, a night before, come up with a presentation to present, right? I bet you my friend Mary, who's a house painter, can't do that, right? She'd probably still be trying to figure this out. So academics and graduate students have lots of hidden skills. Okay, so thinking about some of the things that you can do. If you're working in a lab or you're working on data, you can collect and analyze data. That's a skill. Oftentimes, Solving problems. How many people here solve problems? Right. Why isn't this work? What kind of materials do we need to make it better? Why is this polymer not working? You know, those kinds of things. We're good at persuading people, attention to details, synthesizing vast amounts of information, right? We're also very good at explaining concepts to different audiences. There's all kinds of hidden skill sets, okay, and figuring out what those skills are. So, yes. Yeah. Well, okay, so so maybe for your specific question, it might be, what is it for this particular job that I have that is beyond data analysis? Now, maybe for a social scientist, putting on that you do data analysis might be really, really good, but it's going to be assumed for the work that you already do, right? So what is it that you do that's different? So maybe you've done work with mentoring students. So you have supervisory experience. Maybe you've done grant writing. So maybe you're coming in and they're like, oh, wow, look at this candidate. They've worked on three grants and two were successful, right? So this person knows how to do grant writing. Maybe that's what separates you from the rest, okay? As we discussed, you want to use the language of the ad because there's algorithms that are reading this and pulling up things. You want to tailor it to the job. Really, really, really want to do this. Okay, if you really see a job that you want, spend the time to tailor the resume to that. You can have like a basic couple different stock resumes and CVs that you can shift around. Okay. And then you want to do some preliminary work that we'll talk about in just a second. Okay. How many people here tailor their resumes to the jobs they've applied for? Very good. And how did you do that? Perfect. Yeah, exactly. So oftentimes hiring committees are using rubrics. They literally have the job ad turned into metrics and they're trying to see if you have that. Don't make the job folks look for what you're supposed to be telling them. You have to be really explicit. You need to tell them, right? Those kinds of things. Okay. The narrative arc. So my pitch to you all is before you even start your work on this, and you need to really figure out who you are, right? What is the story that you tell? Each of us is different, and we think, oh, you're a graduate student. I'm a professor, right? You're a graduate student, right? No, we are individuals with these amazing experiences, and we're here doing these things. We have a specific reason, right? Maybe we want to go back and use our work in a community. Maybe we want to work in, some different thing that's related to a parent had a medical incident, and then we want to go into that kind of field, right? So there's an arc, right? And you've selected over time to end up in your different programs, right? And you're building in your programs the experiences for you to go do this future job, right? It's intentional. You've intentionally doing these kinds of selections, right? It isn't just a given. I'm a material scientist, or I'm a social scientist. There's lots of reasons, right? So you need to figure out what that is. What stories does your materials tell? And your materials, your CVs, your documents, your cover letters, that interview of what you decide to talk about and how you present yourself, right? So you really need to think about, you know, listing and mapping why why I'm this and not that, why I decided to shift my focus from one project to another, right? Um, why you chose the kinds of classes and the research that you do, right? There's a lot of selection in there. What is the breadth of your work? Maybe you came back to school. Maybe you have some experience in some other field that you're using to, and you plan on rekindling in your career. Um, those kinds of things. Like you're involved in graduate student government, right? There's a reason for that. And maybe that doesn't all flesh out on your resume, but it's going to flesh out. And when you're thinking about who am I as a job candidate and what do I bring and why they want me, right? So it's a whole different kind of positioning. You really know who you are, you know what you want to do, and you're excited, and you're basically interviewing them too. Okay. It's a whole different position rather than I'm a graduate student. I've been working in the lab for the last 4 years. I'm exhausted and this job looked good, right? So, so the idea is this narrative arc is what is your research? Why? How do these items connect, right? What is it? What is that thread that connects all of these experiences? And you could do that in different ways. You could visualize that with concept map. You could draw connections and themes. Okay, again, this might be something that you're doing on your own, but it also might be something where you have conversations with other people, right? Um, your next stage in your career really matters, and making sure that you got a sense of where you're going and why you want to do that is useful exercise. Okay. Any questions? If I had more time, I would do a 5-minute exercise, but we're not going to do that. So how am I going to get started? What do we do when we're thinking about these very important documents, right? So you need to brainstorm. What kinds of experiences or accomplishments, right, do you have? And thinking in human resource language, the things that you do. So you might do lab work. How many people here work in a lab? All right. So it has a title, right? You're working in this lab, but there's much more than that. So thinking about what do you do in there? Are you supervising students? Are you analyzing data? Are you applying for grants? Are you those kinds of things? Study abroads, internships, summer jobs, volunteer work, extracurricular activities, academic and independent projects, publications and presentations, those kinds of things. Get them all down there and figure out. Now, I don't present everything on my CV that I've done ever, even though it's like 15 pages. I get rid of things. I get rid of things because I don't want them to know how old I am. I already said that. But I also get rid of things that, I just don't want them there anymore. So it's curated in a sense. Okay. And there's a red thread that kind of connects it all. So how do I do this? Research. You want to review job ads. What's hot these days in your field, right? Do trends change? Yeah, right? All of a sudden you're like working on, let's say you're working on sustainability, and then you get out and it's like, oh, that's old. Now we're working on such and such. What are the trends? Look at job ads. Like I said last time, find those dream jobs. Start collecting them as PDFs, imagining yourself in there. Research. Look at employer websites to learn about the company's mission, workplace culture, and values. That's going to matter. Who wants to work at some place that doesn't really share your values? Maybe it's a great job, but maybe whatever. So you really want to get into that. Ask. The library here has databases and info available on a lot of these companies, particularly related to the industries that we work with. Ask your librarian, okay? Go to the job fair and talk with industry folks. Do people go here to the job fair? How many people have been? Is it super fun? Yeah. What's fun about it? Okay, good. Yeah. Do you just show up or? How do you go to the job fair? You dress up? Do you bring your resume? Do you have like a little thing you're carrying it in? Maybe your CV? How do you talk to an employer? Those kinds of things. It matters, right? Um, those things matter. Okay, job fair, talk with industry folks, interview someone that has a job that you admire. Ask them how they got into it. If there's anything that they can share. People love to talk. Okay. Right. Any questions? How do I get experiences? Well, you could present your research at the Graduate Research Colloquium, GSG. Registration closes on March 3rd. How many people here will be presenting? Great. Just one? Okay, so you're working it. Why would I want you to, why am I saying you should do this? Do you have research that you could present? Do it. Go for it. Is it just a poster? Oh, oral. And how long is the oral? Oh my goodness. That's a lot. Yeah? 50? So I recommend, I mean, that's a short turnaround, but submit something to the Graduate Research Colloquium. Why? A, you get your research out there, right? And the more you're writing for this, I mean, that can actually be something useful for finishing. B, you're forced to talk to other people about what you do, right? It's awkward sometimes and we need practice. I'm able to stand in front of you and seem rather comfortable, right? Do I seem comfortable? I didn't. When I first started public speaking, I'd have like little mini panic attacks and it was awful. So through time was through practice. You can share your work. Are there prizes? There's prizes. And there's a banquet, right? And chocolate. Okay. So get those experiences. Other ways. The 3-minute thesis you could do. That's again next fall. This is all GSG stuff. Do you still do the alumni poster session? I didn't see it on there. Yeah? Yeah. It's in August. So how about this? Prepare a poster for GSG in March and then present it again in June. And what does that do? That's more lines on your CV, right? Apply for travel funds. There's lots of travel funds around to go to a conference. It doesn't have to be, a conference in Rio de Janeiro. It could be a conference down in Michigan somewhere or Wisconsin. There's lots of local conferences. There's departmental funds. How many people here apply for funding from the departments? Good. You haven't? You need to. Absolutely. Every single person that's in this room should be applying for money every semester, every year. There's money out there. It's not a ton, but we get it. There's GLRC money, there's GSG money, those kinds of things. How many people here are applying for external fellowships? We need to do another one, external fellowships. Yes, there's money. We're leaving money on the table. I mean, I know some of you work in labs and it's all funded. What if you had your own money? I applied. I had my whole graduate education was basically paid for and had lots of experiences. Am I special? No. I was luckily mentored as an undergrad to go for this money and was through talking with people. Get the money. Okay. Department colloquia. How many have department colloquia? What do they call them? Okay. We call it a brown bag, which is kind of a weird name. But how many people here have presented at their department colloquia? Congratulations. Anyone else? So you're presenting at GSG. I recommend, highly suggest that you take that and you present it, whatever you're doing, in a paper form in your department. Do they have those? Okay. And you are again, materials. Where could our colleague present his paper on materials? So what's your project on that you're doing for GSG? Where could we present that? Who else is interested in it? I know that civil engineering has talks, right? Around its colloquia. Most departments do. So where are we going to find would you be into giving a paper somewhere else? Yeah. I'm going to get your email before I leave. Yes, would find opportunities, present your work. People will give you great feedback, and it goes on your CV. Oh, that's it. Okay. So any questions or discussions about, yes.
Do you recommend like removing sometimes like I agree, but like focusing your resume or your CV to like removing things that are like irrelevant or something like that. So things that have like days tied to them, make sure that doesn't look like a big gap in your resume.
Gaps are they're gonna be evident. Sometimes you can't fill in the gaps, but there might be a gap. Maybe you took a couple of years off. Maybe you took a couple years off and you were in Hawaii surfing. All right. That now gets repackaged as I was doing community engagement in Hawaii. Those kinds of things. So you might not be able to explain all kinds of gaps, but maybe you took some time off for other reasons. So how much of a gap are we talking?
Well, for my experience, is like I have a couple different projects. Some of them relevant to what I'd be applying for, some are not.
Yes.
So what I currently have, I have like say this is 9 months of days.
Oh.
I don't know if it's a good idea or not.
That would be an industry specific or department specific question. So you should ask your research mentors because they're going to know what the standard is. And it's not expected to be having a grant. Oftentimes what we see are the grant projects you're working on, but we don't see the grant writing that went into it. So maybe a gap is because you spent a year applying for funding that didn't happen. Those kinds of things. Yes.
Foundation for my gap.
Yeah.
I have a gap on my portfolio.
Yeah.
And for 2-3 years, I didn't have evaluations.
Yeah. I mean, we're humans, right? We're human beings. We're going out on the job market. We're expecting humans. And be a human. And that's why I'm saying about that narrative arc, figuring out who you are. So that when you get in the room and you're having that conversation with somebody, they're excited about you because you seem to really know what you're doing. And a gap or, maybe a misstep, those are fine. That's part of the learning process that you realize, you know what? I'm this and not that, right? I want to do material sciences, but I found actually my heart was in civil engineering. However, I'm applying what I learned in material sciences to understand X, Y, and Z. Okay. All right. That's all I've got. Yes.
This kind of opposite having a gap. More like this is my experience.
Yeah.
I used to work for Google,
Mm-hmm.
and then I got a consultancy job with Westminster Foundation for Democracy, the UK public body. And while working for Google, I was doing that by the side as well. Then I quit Google, started a master's program full time, but I was still doing consultancy with WFB. Now in my CV, how can I overlap that? Even though I was a full-time master's student, can I still, because I mean, I'm just wondering, it could bring up a question like, yeah, too much. That the three organizations is good for my CV.
Yeah. See, I would have to look at your CV to see if it's too much, but is there a way that you could explain that they're connected and supporting each other?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of same.
But you could label them, say, mine is all by semester. So yeah, some semesters are extensive because they did multiple things.
Yeah.
So maybe put them, in chronological time. And
Yeah.
this 3 happened
Or thematically.
Yep.
Or thematically. So you might chronological, like she's explaining, or thematically around themes. Don't want to look like you doing too much all the time though, either, that you're just going from one thing to the other. So you have to really think about what it is that you want to present and that person you want to present. And maybe something needs to drop out. Maybe not. Yeah, well, I'd have to see your CV. I'd be happy if you wanted to send it to me. I'd look at it. Okay. All right. And I need your email because we are definitely going to get you on somewhere else. You should have never raised your hand. Okay, so before I close, how many here are now going to give a talk or at GSG? Okay, good. Excellent. Really? Okay. So is there help on putting together those abstracts for that? Or okay. Well, I'm just thinking we really want to encourage our colleagues here to submit the GSG. Okay. All right. So let's go back to that. The deadline is March 3rd. How long is that? 2 weeks. We have 2 weeks. It's just, you just have to submit an abstract, right? Do you have something readily available? Posters are a lot of work. How many people here have done a poster? Are you good at it? But there's a lot to it, right? But they print those for free someplace where. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. So if you want to do a poster, you can do very, there's other kinds of posters where you can do like a really just simple stuff and some handouts and the ideas you're standing there talking to people. So that, and then they have the other posters where every single inch is filled in with, graphs and things. So there's, okay, perfect. So think about that because this is an example of using the resources at Tech to your advantage. Okay. All right. Thank you all.